it's Francina Simone, and I decided to make this like a two-part video because I figured the discussion part on this is going to be a little bit longer than the actual review, and you know, I'm trying to be cutting down on these minutes, y'all. I really am trying. So here is the discussion part around the controversy of Carve the Mark. There are no spoilers. This is just me discussing the controversy around everything and my thoughts and disappointments, etc., etc. So around the Carve the Mark, there are like three big kind of controversial topics. One is racism, another is ableism, and then another is like self-harm. So I'll talk about them in those three categories, my thoughts, and then some just residual thoughts, I guess, and everything in general. So stick with me on this. Yeah, stick with me. So first is racism. I did find the original article that was posted as the review that everyone was sharing when talking about, oh, you know, like this book has racism in it, but this person of color says it better than I ever could, so here's the article on it. And they kept linking that. The original one was taken down, so I found it like on Tumblr. So the review itself mentions that the Shotet are all dark skinned and the Thuve are all light skinned people with straight hair, and that was just blatantly wrong. And the entire review bases their argument about race centering on Carve the Mark on that being a true statement. And the problem I have with the review is that that is not a true statement. The Shotet and the Thuve people all look the same. They all look the same. They all are varying in skin tones. They all are varying in hair types. They, for the most part, if you have some Shotet people and some Thuve people all at a festival, you would not know the difference between them except for maybe what they wear. But as far as looks, you would have no idea who is who. So yes, there are some people who are darker complexion and people who are lighter complexion, and they are all in the same family as well. So also that kind of calls into like a kind of American-centered idea of thinking. A lot of Americans who talk about diversity tend to think that the argument is white versus black, and they tend to forget that there is entire groups of people who have varying skin tones within the same ethnicity. Okay, that itself is a little problematic, like, because, you know, we kind of erase in a whole world just to like center an argument around ill feelings around one centered topic. So I mean, honestly, in this book, it literally could be that these people could be of all one ethnicity that is all blended and of different colors and stuff. I mean, Veronica Roth mentions that they're a blended society, because honestly, the girl, her brother is as pale as a corpse, even though she's got brown skin, and her mom had really coarse hair. The main guy, he's got pale skin, and his sister is brown skin. She has coarse, curly hair. There's a point in the book where they're hugging, and his sister's hair kind of scratches his face a little bit, meaning that it's probably coarse and has a woolly-like texture. His brother is brown skin and has dense, curly hair. This guy who's a huge aggressor of the Shotet people has long, greasy hair, and it's straight. It's not curly. So honestly, the whole review based its entire idea off of Shotets being dark-skinned and the Thuve being light-skinned, and that was just factually wrong. So it took that and then turned the book into something completely different. And wow, guys, if that's not an example of read the book yourself before you have an opinion on it, I don't know what else is, because all of the people who were sharing that review, I wondered, like, did you also read the book? And a lot of people who did read the book and were saying, well, I didn't see these things. I just want to be like, that's because they weren't there. And you know what is the worst part of this all is that when something like this happens, when you make a big mistake, as in, you know, trying to steamroll an entire book and painting it a picture of some sort for a whole bunch of people to see as something like that, is you take away from the argument at whole. When someone does see racism in a story or in a book and someone else doesn't, now we have to call into question, well, did you read it well? Because remember the last time, you know what I mean? Like, you lose credibility and faith. And if you're going to make these huge, like, very controversial statements, at least look to see if there's honesty in them. And you know, as you guys know, I don't read books to find out or to prove and or disprove shit. Like, honestly, like, first of all, who's got time for that? Second of all, that's not my, like, whole shtick. I love to uplift books that I think, you know, are great, and or books that I think really could help other people, or books that other people are really looking for and love. And I love diversity. I love diversity, but diversity doesn't mean erasing some people and only showcasing others. Diversity means being inclusive, and I love inclusiveness and everybody being involved and everybody uplifting everybody and everybody being positive positive. And we can't have that if we are, you know, changing narratives on books, slandering an author. You know, like, people were honestly saying terrible things about Veronica Roth, about how she was an internalizing racism and or a blatant racist because, you know, she had these savage, dark-skinned people in her book. And it was like, the only savage people was the family. And only two of them were brown, and the other ones were pale. Like, I don't even want to say white and black, because I don't even know if that's, like, a thing. Because, again, if I were to say white and black, we are erasing, like, ethnic groups that have varying skin tones that kind of have this kind of same makeup. Oh, I'm just saying. Okay, if we're going to sit here and police people about being sensitive, let's practice sensitivity ourselves. As far as ableism is in this book, Sierra does deal with chronic pain, and I've never seen the chronic pain like glorified and or demonized. There is one passage where she talks about how her current gift, she sees the gift in the pain, which is her ability to bear it. And I feel like when people, they often talk about it out of context, because if you have chronic pain, you probably know that a thought that runs across your mind often is that your body is weak and or you feel very weak. Sometimes what runs across your mind is that sometimes maybe what is it that made you deserve this out of the luck of the draw of all of the people who could possibly have pain? Why is it that you have it? And if you are a young child, or you started, or your chronic pain started as a young child, you often wonder, what did you do to deserve it? And or you think that there is something wrong with you, hence why you are not normal like everyone else seemingly who doesn't have pain. Now, I'm not going to throw out credentials on chronic pain and all that shit. I feel like we do that all enough, throwing out our credentials of why we can have insight on something, which is a whole nother topic in itself. But the passage here, when she talks about being able to bear it, to sum it up, what this chick is saying is she's not a weak person and she does not deserve pain. However, this is the current gift that she got, and so she's going to look at it in a different way. She's not weak. She's actually a very strong person because of the amount of pain that she has to go through every day just to live, and the fact that she doesn't let that stop her from living. It doesn't let her stop her from even loving or being a good person. And so she can bear all of this. She can bear it. She is strong enough. She can take it. She's going to take it on, and she's going to keep living her goddamn life despite whatever the fuck this gift is or whatever the fuck it was given to her. So, you know, I mean, like, that's a message in itself. That was her moment of self-empowerment. If it doesn't match yours and you have chronic pain, what can I say? She is not you. You're not her. You're two completely separate individuals. Just like the way that I deal with it, the way with anybody else deals with it, is going to be different from you. That's a whole nother topic on representation and why we're looking for it and what we're looking for it, and if we even know what we mean when we say representation. So I'm gonna move on to the next topic, which is self-harm. This is the only topic where I can honestly say we can discuss it because it's actually there. Versus things being cherry-picked and or just completely erroneously wrong. So there are moments where Sierra, you can say that she might be practicing self-harm or she is a candidate for it and maybe a red flag for it. And even Akos at a certain point, you know, you can say because of the trauma that they're in and the cultural act of scarification that they could be muddling the lines a little bit to deal with this, especially since they're teens. So they might be playing with fire. But I think the question here is that promoting self-harm? To me, promotion would honestly mean that if you take an action like self-harm, you are then saying that the consequences of it are great, and or the use of self-harm is a great tool of dealing with depression, of dealing with trauma, of dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder. To me, that's promoting it instead of saying, hey, if you're harming yourself, it means that there are underlying things going on and you've got to get help, because this isn't helping you deal with those issues. This is you trying to mask them. If you keep masking them for long enough, you're going to realize that this isn't big enough to cover it and you're going to do something else and it's going to be worse. So one is obviously a promotion and the other one is probably more the realistic and the more realistic narrative around it. And this to me sits on the most common realm of you're reading something, something's going on, and we're not going to make any type of social commentary on it. It's a story in which you view what's happening without somebody else's commentary, because then you wouldn't be reading a story, you'd be reading a brochure. Now, a lot of people are going to say, well, this is geared towards teens, so it should have a positive message. No, just because it's for teens does not mean that it needs positive messages. I understand that, okay, a lot of people think that teens are always at risk. I mean, a lot of people go around like, you know, I just watched the last season of Degrassi, and this counselor, this bitch was popping up out of every corner, and she was like, I was checking your socials. How are you doing today? Hey, Miles, I just so happened to look at your socials, and you were posting some pretty depressing stuff. You know, you took a picture of you being sad and a picture of some flowers that were dying. Are you okay? And like the bitch was popping up. She was like, I just noticed this, you know, like every teen was at risk. Now, I'm not arguing against that. She was a counselor. That's her job. This is a book. It's not the book's job to counsel children. This book just showcases a lot of different experiences, and discussions can be held around that. That's the part of the counseling. That's the part of interest. If you feel like, honestly, you know teens who read this stuff and you feel like, you know, it has a lot of heavy topics in it, why don't you then read it too and then have a discussion with them about it if you're concerned? If you're a teen and you're reading stuff like this and you're like, wow, you know, I felt like that was a heavy topic, find communities in which people discuss this stuff, except for Twitter because we ruined that one. We discuss this stuff and we unpack some of this stuff and have discussions so that you can get a whole rounded, well picture of it. If you read this and you're like, and you could care less about any of the topics that I've brought up and you were just like, it was a mess story, or I loved it, or, you know, not my type of thing. It's perfectly fine. You did what most people do with stories. It's just like television. I mean, we've watched 100. How many people have campaigns against 100 because of the violence, because of all the heavy topics that they unload, the trauma, the PTSD, the alcoholism, the drug usage, all that crazy shit that's happening on that show? Do we then need to stop the show and then have like somebody do a broadcasting at the end to unpack it? And teens have to sit and watch so that they can understand that, you know, turning to alcohol when your friend blows up all your other friends isn't okay. Like, there's a difference between entertainment media and educational media. And we forget often that it's the job of parents and or the community to educate kids about how to handle and to role model how to handle heavy topics and or positive mental health. You know, hint, hint, if you're on Twitter and you talk about your negative mental health all the time and you have breakdowns and all sorts of craziness and you share all your negativity and your main audience is teens and you're a grown-ass adult, you probably should rethink how you communicate with your teen audience and try to be a role model for the things you preach against harmfulness. Off my soapbox, but it's the community and or family members or the immediate people who are supposed to be teaching these skills so that when teens go out and interact with media, they know how to unpack it. They know how to unpack reading sex in books. If you watched my video on sex and young adult, then you'll know that I am neither for or against sex and young adult, but I am for people in the teens community being able to educate them on healthy practices revolving around sex so that when they come across it in media, whether that be in a young adult book or in the adult section, they'll know how to unpack those things. They'll know that that is not a reflection of them or what they should do or a reflection of a negative and or toxic relationship. They'll know that that is a reflection of what's happening in the book and that they should probably think about why it's happening in the book and unpack it the way that it's happening in the book and not try to mimic that specific instance in their personal lives because it's a book. So with all that being said, my main opinion about Carve the Mark is I was highly, 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 highly disgusted with how people reacted around this book, about how they presented themselves and how they went about having a discussion around this book. I mean, first of all, you have a whole bunch of people sharing an article that has blatant misinformation that no one really wanted to correct. People who were obviously speaking out against it were probably correcting it, but the people who were sharing it, who had read the book, either felt like they could not because they were scared they'd be dragged across Twitter. And let's not pretend like that's not a thing, guys. Let's not pretend like people aren't scared to say shit or to correct stuff or to have a voice, whether or not they are marginalized or not, because they know that you're going to drag them across Twitter. Let's stop pretending that that doesn't happen or that I'm not a part of that. I just subtweet the shit out of these people and all these people just went there like, because I don't know why. Stop pretending that the community isn't toxic and doesn't do shit like that. So whether those people read this and saw that there was some misfactual stuff there and they just felt like it was too sensitive of a topic to touch and or correct because it was about race and a person of color had written it, you know, like, I don't know. I don't know all the implications of why people were sharing this article with blatant misinformation. But it happens. It painted this book in a completely different light than what it is. And you know what? It's not the problem. Okay, And it's not the conversation that it's centered around, which is race and bringing up all these topics. That, again, is not the problem. The problem is no one was thinking for themselves. And in that case, at the end of the day, when it comes out that what you're talking about isn't even relative to this book and or productive to this, you end up looking like a fucking moron. You end up looking like a fucking moron when you share information that is blatantly untrue and or can be disproven with just a few pages of reading the book. Like, it makes it look like you didn't read it or you don't even care about the book in itself, especially if Veronica Roth's name was in your mouth and you were dehumanizing her and or saying defamatory things about her character based off of misinformation that wasn't even true in the book. If you were asking her to speak on all of this stuff and she's over here confused because she's like, well, if you read the book, you would know that I wouldn't have to speak on it because it's not in the book. At the end of the day, when that happens, it makes the entire community look like they're completely incapable of reading and or coming up with their own opinions and or practicing humanity. So, like every time I look at this cover, I'm just like, wow, it brings back all those memories of all the crazy stuff that happened. And I just honestly hope that as a community, people can learn from this, especially the adults in the community who have participated, especially the authors who are adults in this community, or people who are a part of the publishing industry. When you just blatantly kind of jump on bandwagons and you don't promote reading, if you promote the idea that you don't have to read it, you just trust what somebody else says. And I'm going to stop there and say, I'm not talking about trusting a reviewer to inform you of whether or not you will pick up a book. I'm talking about trust a reviewer and then go out and educate people based on what that person said, even though you didn't read the book. That's what I'm talking about. There's a big difference. It's not even subtle. It's a huge difference. I just, I do some heavy side eyeing when people do that or when people share around reviews and they, without actually giving their own opinion on it, they're just sharing it and saying that this is the opinion. So many people are uncomfortable with truths. Whether those truths be that there is a lack of diversity or whether that truth be, well, are you doing your part to promote diversity? Or whether that truth be, well, some people don't want to write outside of their own wheelhouse, so you'll have to look for authors who do or authors whose wheelhouses are similar to yours. Like a lot of people are uncomfortable with solid truths. And when people are highly uncomfortable with truth, we end up doing things like misreading an actual book and seeing prejudice where prejudice isn't, or preaching that prejudice is somewhere where it isn't in hopes of making progress or in hopes in shaking down a big name like Veronica Roth so that, everyone else will fall in line, I guess. And at the end of the day, when you try to move the line or move progress and you base it off of lies, all you do is discredit your own position. I mean, all that does is center the narrative around diversity, around negativity. I mean, and there's nothing wrong with having a discussion about books that do internalize some type of racism or some type of ableism or some type of self-harm or whatever have you. Books that do internalize the stereotypes in that and play it out, and the book falls apart because that's not really how things work because you're working off of stereotypes instead of truths. There's nothing wrong with discussing those books and talking about them. I refuse to use the word call out because calling out doesn't imply having a discussion. It implies us telling someone that they did something wrong, then them apologizing for it. And at the end of the day, as we can see, that gets you nowhere. So when the narrative is surrounded by all that negativity, I mean, honestly, the negativity just grows. You know what, y'all? I'm just not about that life. So I read Carve the Mark. That's it. That's my opinions on the controversy. That's everything. Honestly, wow. If you haven't seen the review yet, go ahead and check out the review. But that's all I have to say about it. And, sadly enough, it really makes me want to distance myself away from these conversations about diversity because at the end of the day, the conversations around diversity shouldn't be me fact-checking people. It should be a conversation, a positive conversation about inclusiveness, and it should be lifting up books and talking about all the things that we love and the things that we wish we saw when we were younger, or we're really excited about the progress we're seeing and really looking forward to more. Those should be the conversations those are the conversations that I want to take part of. That's all I got for you guys. If you guys want to have any conversations with me about Carve the Mark down below or about the controversy, keep it respectful, honestly. If you have gripes, I understand, but no dragging people in the comments, okay? No being rude. Sometimes I'll be reading y'all's comments and I'm like, okay, I understand that you're angry about things, but you're being a dick right now, and just because you agree with my points doesn't mean it's okay to be a dick. I'm not somebody who's gonna let you be a dick just to be a dick. So, keep it respectful in the comments, and as always, I will talk to you guys later. TTYL, ta-ta for now. Bye! Bye.